Welcome to Tail Learn Code. Here there will be tales about software development, learning from each other, code to build solutions. And now your host, Chad Green.
Let me welcome Darren Hale. Really great to meet. I gotta admit, have we met before? Because I really don't remember.
We may have.
Okay,
so I attended Code PaLOusa last year for the first time, and we may have met at that point.
All right. Yeah, I gotta admit, it's a little bit hard when you go out and speak a lot of different places and you run events. I kind of forget if I've met people before or not. I did look.
Sure.
I looked to see if you spoke at Code PaLOusa before, because then I feel bad if I've forgotten you and you spoke at Code PaLOusa, which I'm not saying this never happened.
Nope. Last year was just my first year attending, so this is the first year speaking.
Well, I wasn't sure because being in St. Louis, I mean, like I've spoken at DevUp. So a lot of times I meet people there, and honestly, I forget because I meet a lot of people when I go to conferences. So
sure, awesome. They can be a whirlwind. Yep.
Well, then
thanks for having me.
It's a great meeting you. Great to you'll be speaking to Code PaLOusa. Really looking forward to that. Some really great talks. We'll talk about that here in a moment. But really cool to see those. So let's just start. Quickly introduce yourself.
Okay. My name is Darren Hale. I'm a software developer, actually in between positions right now, but I've been doing this for well over 20 years. I'm mostly .NET stack, but I've done everything from Visual Basic when I started my career up through Java for a number of years. I've been doing C# and .NET for the last 15 years, almost 15 years at this point. So I've done a lot of different kinds of coding. I think C++ is the only thing I haven't done professionally, but I've done a little Perl. I've done actually a little Fortran. I've done all kinds of stuff. So all over the board.
You've definitely been there, done that type thing.
Yes.
So I have to ask, what's been your favorite language?
Generally not the one I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, right? It's kind of the new one that I'm learning at that point. Java, when I first got into it, I really liked, but I was coming from Visual Basic, so it was much more object-oriented, and I'm an object-oriented developer. When I got into C#, it felt very familiar because I came from Java into C#, so it was comfortable and home. Recently, I've been learning F#, and I'm really getting into some of the syntax and things of F#. So, like I said, it's always the next language that I'm learning is kind of the favorite one at the time.
Yeah, so I was noticing your tweets. So I noticed you've been doing a lot with F# and with Azure Functions. I gotta admit, I didn't realize you could do F# with Azure Functions. I somehow missed that you could start doing that.
I didn't until the pandemic. Once the pandemic hit and I started digging into it, it took me a while because the documentation didn't lead me to a direct path. But once I got into it and saw it, the world opened up for me. Yeah,
I'll say that is probably my complaint about. I love Azure Functions. I use them a lot. Actually, the conversation I was having right before I got along with you was, we're going to do this, and Azure Functions is going to solve all the problems, right? Not that they necessarily solve all your problems, but for the problem we need to solve, they will. But my probably complaint is that sometimes documentation isn't really all there, right? It's especially with new things, right?
Yes,
new things just seem to pop up. And you just got to figure it out.
When they pop up, the order of the search results sometimes matters, right? That article from 2018 may be somewhat true, but not quite accurate versus that article from 2019 or 2020. So
that's the other hard part is that it has changed so much so quickly.
Yes,
that finding information can be hard.
It can. That's half of what we do, I think, sometimes is just sorting through all the information that's out there to figure out what's actually correct.
Now, what I do like, I got to admit, I don't know how public this is, so I won't go too much into it, but word I heard was that they're not going to update it for .NET 5.
What's that, Azure Functions or
Azure
F#?
Functions? Well, Azure Functions. So they're going to keep Azure Functions on 3.1.
Interesting.
And wait till 6. Now, again, I might be saying something that's NDA. I'm not 100% sure. So I might have just violated an NDA, but I don't think so. I believe that is sort of public knowledge.
I'm going to have to look that up because that's an interesting play for them.
Well, and again, I won't go too much into the details, but the biggest reason was for supportability, right? And more importantly, because .NET 5 is not a LTS or LTS. It's a current release, which I thought it was a very interesting conversation because it has been my complaint about .NET 5 that .NET 5 won't be LTS. Now I get why, especially now. It's actually, talk about awesome timing, right? Because when they originally announced it, it wasn't going to be LTI. It was going to be, LTS. Sorry, LTI is something that's actually what I'm working on today, which is a whole different thing. But that wasn't going to be LTS. But after the pandemic, they're actually not finishing everything they originally planned for .NET 5. And because if you listen to Bill, they were talking about it, right? That the pandemic has hit them like Maui. Maui was supposed to be, I don't know if it was supposed to be fully baked, but it was definitely supposed to be there by .NET 5. If you notice what they said is that the preliminary stuff for Maui will be in .NET 5, but then there's going to be a .NET 6 preview like a week or two after .NET 5 goes out. That's going to be the first real pieces of Maui, right? And so it's funny because they made this announcement well before we even knew what this pandemic was going to be, that it was going to be a current release. And it actually turns out it had to have been anyways, because they weren't going to be far enough along to really make it a current release. So it was fortuitous in their planning.
Sure. Well, it just worked out for them.
Now, I'm sure some conspiracy theorists thinks, well, Bill Gates knew about this all along. Now, granted, Bill Gates hasn't been a part of Microsoft for years, right? But Bill Gates knew about this all along.
Now, he's off saving the world. He doesn't worry about .NET anymore.
Yeah, which is a good. I found it really interesting how he has changed his whole world, around him.
Yes. His demeanor is different.
Yeah.
He used to be a very different personality when he was running Microsoft than he is today.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. We watch interviews. I mean, number one, he's not so nervous.
Right.
It was so funny. I mean, they were. I remember during the whole antitrust stuff, because again, you and I are around the same age, so we remember all the antitrust stuff.
Yes, we do.
And actually, I think I'm still older than you. I say now I think about it, because I know when you graduated college, so I know I'm older than you. But at any rate, it was always interesting because he was doing this whole thing, and everyone's like, "Oh, look, he's lying through his teeth." I'm like, now you do realize he's somewhere on the spectrum, right?
Oh, yeah. And, Asperger's, if I remember right.
Yeah. And although I do find, I think most everyone in software development is somewhere on the spectrum.
Oh yeah,
might be really light on the spectrum, but I think it just. There's something about it to be a good software developer and to really care about it, right? I mean, but you got, sure enough, you have the folks who do this, it's just a job.
Yep.
Right. And but the ones who really get passionate into it, which is why, it's so funny. You look at a speaker room and most of the speakers are the biggest introverts around.
Yes.
But yeah, we can get up and go speak, right? It's
well, some easier than others, right? You look around the speaker room and you see those that are really working hard at it, and then others that are a little more practiced with it.
Right. Well, because they've
been
doing it for a long time.
INTJ spectrum. Yep.
Yeah. No, exactly. It's well, it's funny because people think that I, am just rock solid. I'm like, no, I'm actually scared to death every single time I get up there. Yep. The trick for me, what I found is my first couple minutes are rough. But then at that point, I'm just geeking out about a topic I really enjoy. And so it just comes easy at that point, right? Because I forget there's an audience there. Although subconsciously I don't, because I remember to do all the tricks of, looking around, you make sure you're making contact. But other than that, that's almost muscle memory at this point.
Yeah, for me, it's been, I like to get that engagement, right? I try to find the people that are really engaged, and it almost becomes a conversation.
Yeah.
And I like that conversational style. Yeah, I've got the prepared material and I want to go through that. But if there's audience engagement, I can kind of meld and flex with that, because like you said, you're geeking out on a topic that you're really passionate about. If somebody else is really passionate about it, it kind of creates an energy in the room that I think is really exciting.
Mm-hmm. Now, with it being said, have you presented virtually yet?
Not outside of like company meetings and things like that. In my previous job, I had a remote team in Louisville, which is kind of how I got to know the Louisville tech community. So I had a lot of that virtual presentation type stuff, but it was a known group. It was a comfortable group, right? It, generally people that worked for me. I haven't presented to an audience per se virtually, but
I will say it's different.
I can imagine.
Yeah. And sure enough, we will be we'll be reminding people. So we can only have so many people turn on the cameras because some of the limitations of the system. It's really interesting. We can have up to 500 people in a session. Okay. Trust me, you won't have 500 people in a session. As of so far, we don't have 500 people registered. I would love that, but so far it's still smaller numbers here. But I can only have 10 people on camera, right? That's just the way how it works. One of the things I'm hoping for, and I'm getting ready to write an email to the attendees, and I'm going to ask someone to make sure they turn their cameras on because it makes a difference having your camera turned on. Which is my general announcement out to, while we're interviewing folks. If you attend a virtual session, whatever it is, whether it's a user group, a conference, if you have the option to turn your camera on, I do highly recommend it because it helps the speaker a lot.
Yep. Now, the good thing is I still don't have to put pants on, so that's fantastic. I'm looking forward to that aspect.
Well, see, I have a standing desk, and I will raise my desk every once in a while, and I usually stand up quicker than my desk does. So it would.
Nice.
Yes.
I have not gotten there yet.
No, so I work from home anyways. It's just so I've been doing this. The company I work at right now, we don't even have an office at all. Not just for the tech team, but at all. Sure. And so I've been here for a year and a half. But even before that, I was I worked for a company that was 2 hours. Well, basically Evansville, so halfway between Louisville and St. Louis. Yep. And so I didn't go there every day for obvious reasons. Right? It was a bit of a drive.
Yes.
So I've been working from home for several years. Okay. So I already had the standing desk. I already have a good setup and all that. So that helped a lot with all that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm still working on my pandemic setup. I'm still kind of in the middle of the house, in the living room. And
so in other words, you've also been having fun with all the, you had to buy the equipment. It's been more expensive. And,
yep. Tech support.
Just
with
trying
having
to find
kids
the
working
equipment.
virtually. That was kind of difficult. We needed a new router to support, 3 students remote and a teacher remote as well as me. So yeah, the tech support has been, I've got a lot more sympathy for my help desk guys than I ever have.
Mm-hmm. And I was telling you that we almost never get any comments. Now we're getting comments on the chat. So
fantastic.
Byron Schuff, who I don't know if you ever met, it's Douglas Starnes down in Memphis. I don't know if you ever met Douglas, but so he says it's interesting because when we do virtual meetups on Teams, we let everyone turn on their cameras, but when the presentation starts, most all turn off their camera. Which exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, he's wondering if people think that's the polite thing to do. Like muting your mic. Now, sure enough, definitely mute your mic. And that's why, like my meetups, I run them on Zoom, and I mute everyone's mic, right? Because it is so easy. Number one, I turn it on so that anyone who joins afterwards, it's automatically muted. Because it's so easy to not realize it, and all of a sudden, your wife pops in or husband, whatever, what they. Or something like that, right? Or the dog starts barking, right?
Absolutely. I think a lot of times people turn it off for bandwidth, right? Video is notorious for bandwidth. So if their connection's hurting or you've got 5 other people in the house streaming something, it's just a courtesy thing. Yeah.
Well, and like I was telling you before, last week all of a sudden we started having problems streaming or doing these interviews, and if I start having problems, I start. So let me answer this real quick because, like I said, I've got a delivery guy showing.
Sure.
Just a second.
Sure. Absolutely.
Hello. Well, that was Angela from the warranty department.
Oh, nice.
So in other words, not a call I needed to take.
But you never know when you've got somebody.
Well, it's the hard part. I normally would just ignore those calls, answer them afterwards.
Yep. I get it.
Yeah, Douglas, you probably missed it. I was mentioning that I'm waiting for a repair guy to show up, who's supposed to show up, sometime between 10 and 12, and of course now it's going on 12. So, I'm not going to ask you about your job because right now your job is looking for a job. Although I guess so, you just started looking the other day. So, well, I mean, let's talk about that, right?
Sure.
I'll go say, yeah, probably won't be there till at least 2:00, which probably so, which is fine, right? Except for when I schedule interviews, that I broadcast live online, right? So let's talk about your job search, right? I mean, it was interesting. You were joking earlier, right? You purposely didn't search in July because you didn't want to do all the recruiters and everything, which that's the fun part about LinkedIn, right? It's
yes, it is.
It's a good and bad part about it, right? Yeah. But I'm curious. I mean, what are you looking for?
That's an interesting question. Right now, I'm kind of looking in the consulting space, right? Mm-hmm. I've been a permanent employee for 20 years, roughly. I did some consulting right out of school, more project-based type stuff. Uh-huh. I want to kind of get back into that role I want to see the world to some degree, right? Sure. I want that breadth of experience. Another thing that I'm kicking around is, what do software people do? They create applications. My wife being a teacher, she's had some need for some tooling with the whole pandemic and working virtually. So I started putting together some things for her at the end of last school year. I'm still playing with that. If nothing else, it gives me a chance to learn and grow, but there could be something that grows out of that as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm exploring a lot of different options really at this point.
Yeah. So, so I'm curious because at least for the last couple of years, you've been a director of software development. So, I mean, yes. Are you looking to stay in a management type role, or are you looking to get more hands-on? Or maybe your role was very I mean, again, director of software development could mean a lot of different things depending on where.
It could, and I rarely used my title. I always joked that I didn't put a title on business cards when I had business cards. I would always let my boss introduce me, and it was kind of this game of roulette. What title am I going to have today? And I would just roll with it. It was really kind of fun. Really, the difference, I don't see there being a huge difference between what I was doing in a managerial role versus what I would do as a hands-on person. The company I was with, I started very early in the company's history. I started 6 months into the company's existence. Okay. So I built a lot of the software that is still in use today. So even if I wasn't working directly with that code on a day-to-day basis, I knew it. I was working with the guys that were working on it, helping with architecture, with testing, with concepts, with the business rules. So I was very much in the weeds, even if I wasn't hands-on keyboard all the time. Mm-hmm. A lot of what I like to do is I like to explore new technology. I like to use it to solve new problems, to solve business problems, and understand what the business ecosystem is, and then to teach people, either to teach technologists what I'm learning, teach business people how to use the things that we're building. That doesn't change whether you're in management or you're hands-on day-to-day, in my opinion. So a lot of what I want to do going forward is the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. Whether it's a director title, a consultant title, to me, it's going to be pretty much the same job. Just do I see a whole lot of different people on a daily basis, or the same people on a daily basis?
Yeah, no. Well, that's why I joked. I mean, director of software development can really depend on where you're at and who you are, really. I mean, that's funny. My first quote unquote director position. I mean, that wasn't the title. I mean, it was. I'm trying to remember. I was software delivery manager. Was what the title was, but basically I had a team of 63 people, so it was a big delivery manager position, right? Sure. It was funny there. I actually wasn't allowed to code. I wasn't even allowed to turn in any code. Wow. Now that was an Army regulation, right? So I was working for HP. Our customer was the Army, and the Army had this whole thing that the directors weren't allowed to write code because they believed it was a conflict of interest.
Sure.
Because as a director, I could say just push it, right? Right. I'm the boss. Just go and push it. And it really annoyed me because there were a couple times we were working on something that I was the knowledge base expert as far as when it came to development wise, but I wasn't allowed to write the code on it, right? And I'm like, oh come on, let me. I can solve this so quickly, right? And I remember a couple occasions I went home at night and I wrote a prototype.
Yep.
And I'm like, look, you can't use this code, but here you go.
It may look something like this.
Yeah, because I remember one time the team really was stuck in something. I had it in my head, right? I knew exactly how, and not that I was smarter than anyone else. It was just I was looking at it a different way, right? The whole thing of not being right into everything, and all of a sudden you get a different way of looking at it. And so that's exactly what I did. I went home that night, coded it up real quick with a different set of data. So I literally didn't touch any of the company, or the customer's data and everything. I'm like,
sure.
Here's a possible way of how to do it. And sure enough, 3 or 4 days later, it was in test, right?
Absolutely. In my previous role, I was a big fan of pair programming, and we would do it somewhat selectively. Not everything was paired, but it offered that opportunity that when I needed to share something that I was the expert on, I could sit down with somebody, with a group of developers. They would be the ones pounding out the code, but I could challenge them on how to test it, the business rules. Is that really the right approach? That's an I before E sort of problem, right. Those kinds of things. I could help guide that solution even if I wasn't hands-on keyboard. And then if they were really stuck, I could do hands-on keyboard, show them what they needed to do, and let that move on. So.
Sure enough, my last company, most everyone that worked for me were very junior, right? It was a very junior team. So I spent a lot of time doing pair programming, and because it was the best way I had to teach them, right? I mean, because when I mean junior, I mean like some of these guys, this is their first programming job. Yep. So they were really learning from the ground up what to do, and but it was a blast, right? Because it's funny because it's basically what I do now on Twitch, right? Because I'm just talking when I'm coding. I just don't have someone directly over my shoulder. It's they're watching. Gonna have a whole lot of people watching me, but
exactly.
And really enjoyed it. Now, the hard part I had with that, being quote unquote such a high level person, was they would kind of shy away, right? And they would get a little bit quiet. I'm like, no, just go. Number one, I told them, I said, look, when I'm on the keyboard and you see me screwing up, make sure you let me know. Even if you just think it's something screwing up, right? Because I always told them I learn more from junior developers than I do from senior developers.
Absolutely.
Right, because like we were just talking about, you're seeing it in a different light, right? You're not putting 25 years or 30 years experience behind it, right? It's
right. Well, it's fresh eyes.
Exactly.
A fresh viewpoint on it. Yeah. I found very often in that situation as the senior developer, I had to get good at reading body language because the exact same thing, right? As many times as I tell them, if I'm doing something wrong, bump the keyboard, right? Literally make it hard for me to type so that I have to stop. They would still be tentative, but you could kind of, if you felt people kind of closing up and inching away, like they wanted to distance themselves, you can kind of see that in the corner of your eye and go, all right, what are you thinking? Right? Tell me what you're thinking.
Well, that's what I got to the point, I just ask a lot of questions. So what do you think about this? What do you think about that? No, what do you really think about this? Right? Don't just right. I don't want to be a yes man, right? That type of stuff.
Yep. Well, make them type, right? I always wanted to make sure the people I was working with, if there's only one keyboard, they had it, right? I wanted them to go through that, and I'm just asking questions, trying to provoke that thought process.
Yeah, I would do a mix because it would depend on what we were doing that day.
Sure.
And so, some of the stuff that I was doing with them really was for me to work on, right? Because it did require someone with more experience in that type of stuff, but I wanted them to at least see it so they had exposure to it, right?
Yep.
Here's what I'm working on, right? Or it might be because I'm, a bunch of stuff I was doing there was new technologies, right? And I was still learning myself. I'm like, well, here, I'm gonna work on this. But watch me, ask questions, right? Because number one, I don't necessarily know the answer either, right? But it's that was actually, like I said, that was a good way to, like I was learning Razor Pages at the time, right? And it was a good way to learn Razor Pages, right? Because although they reminded me so much of web forms, it really wasn't that hard, right?
Right. A little bit different syntax, but kind of the same thought process.
Well, also, like last week I was learning Blazor, and I'm like, oh my god, this is just a different form of web forms, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
I just don't, now the code and the HTML is on the same page, right?
Right. Which is a lot like the original ASP, if I remember right.
Yes. Yep. Well, that's because it was all VB script, right?
Yes, it was.
Yes, like I said, I have been around. Sure enough, my first professional program was BASIC, right? And I mean BASIC. Yeah. I don't mean VB. I mean BASIC.
Exactly, BASIC. Yes.
And so I've been around. Which was the other fun. Over the weekend I was So the Code PaLOusa website is actually written in VB.
Okay.
Because I was a VB proponent for the longest time. And,
Sure.
and fought against it, right? You know, and I could do C# just fine, but I was like, no,
Yeah.
VB is the language used, and sure enough, the Code PaLOusa website's the last thing I built fully in VB. And the other day I was having to do some work on it. I'm like, oh yeah, this does bring me back to some good days. Now C# is definitely better nowadays, but
Right.
you know,
It was a powerful tool. You could do an awful lot with it really quickly.
well, I was joking. I'm like, I'm now having to remember not to put in semicolons. That was the hardest part I had when I went to full-time C# development, was remember typing those semicolons and
Yep.
and the thing I loved about VB that C# does not have is the with statement, right?
Yes.
So like for with this like with this data set and then dot whatever, right? I have to type in that variable name every single time.
Yep.
And that was what I was looking. I was looking at some of that code, and I was like, "Oh, I remember these days, right?"
Yes. There's a similar construct there in F# on the functional side. They've got
Really?
this piping concept that it looks very similar to that with statement.
Cool. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I got to admit, I never really got into F#. I mean, I've listened to a couple of I've been to a couple of presentations and everything. I just never really get into it. I got to admit, every time I see it. I mean, this is just my opinion, right? This is not a reflection of what F# really is. But every time I see it, I'm like, it just seems like a lot of work to get the same place.
I was kind of the same way. I was always leery of it, knowing Microsoft and how they do language design, that it wouldn't be a pure functional approach. But with the pandemic and having more time to learn, it was an easy way for me to get into functional programming because I didn't have to install anything new. It was already there in my .NET tooling. It was already there in my editor. I could just start. As I've gotten into it, I'm trying to force my brain out of that object-oriented mode into the functional mode, and that's the hardest thing for me. The syntax is okay. Once I get that down, I'm not dealing with objects. I'm dealing with functions, and then once I do that, I can start to see where there's a little more concise syntax, where you can do things with a little less code than I could on the C# side. Not completely. I'm still very much a beginner in that area, but it's growing on me. The concepts are growing on me.
Yeah. Well, sure. I mean, we can start going into one of your talks because this is perfect. So, functional programming techniques in C#. Because I was just thinking, I mean, functional programming is getting more and more into C#. I mean, number one, you look at like the features that Mads Jorgensen's adding to C#.
Yep.
It's heavily influenced by the functional paradigm.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, obviously, we're going to learn about functional programming, but I mean, what is the, what are the takeaways out of that talk?
So, to some degree, it's a little bit about kind of my journey as a developer to some degree, right? I'm constantly trying to improve myself, and I was introduced to functional programming as a concept about 8 years ago, if I remember right. It looked neat, it looked cool, it looked powerful, but I couldn't get my head wrapped around it, and it wasn't my day-to-day. I'm an object-oriented guy on a internally, right? It's just wired into me. But as I saw it, I could see a power there and a simplicity there. And then you start to see it cropping up in C#. So all of a sudden, there's this thing that I'm interested in that I'm curious about, but now it's showing up in the language that I'm using on a daily basis. The origin of the talk was really trying to meld those together because I think developers need to know it because things like Poly and even ASP.NET MVC stuff is using functional paradigms to get fluent syntaxes to make life easier for the average object-oriented developer. So what I wanted to do is introduce the object-oriented folks to these techniques so they can understand the libraries and the systems that they're using on a daily basis.
Cool. I mean, what would be like your favorite technique out of there? I mean, I'm not giving away your talk, but I mean,
No, absolutely.
In general, what's been your favorite technique to use functionally in C#?
I think the thing for me is the concept of immutability, right? It's one of the characteristics that you find in a lot of functional programming languages. That concept is easy to test, and I'm a big proponent of unit testing. And it's easy to reason about. If the method or function doesn't change the world around it, but maybe creates new things, it's safe to reason about. It's safe to understand. And one of the things I've always seen, junior folks don't tend to understand that, right? So they'll change objects and pass mutated objects around. And that's the source of almost every bug that ever comes out of that code.
Sure.
As a more senior developer, I know better. I'm not going to change that state. I really want stateless stuff. And in a microservices world, serverless world, stateless is the name of the game. So that to me is kind of my favorite technique because it simplifies my tests. It makes the code easier to understand. It makes it easier to reason about. It makes it easier to talk about. So that's kind of my favorite one at the moment.
Cool. And then, so have you been paying attention to the C# 9? I always forget what version we're on. So the C# 9 changes that are coming, have you been paying attention to those?
A little bit. I've actually been out of town for the last 2 weeks, so I'm getting my head back into that. We were actually in a cabin in the woods in New Mexico, so I was connected to nothing.
Awesome.
I do tend to pay attention to those things as they come out, mostly to see where they're going with it. And you can see a lot of the performance stuff that they want to do with Azure showing up in C#, and they're doing it with some of the functional techniques.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, I got to admit, when I first saw it, I was like, but the one that's really been picking up to me is the records. The C# reference. And admittedly, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. But now I'm seeing it more and more. I think that's something I will end up using quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm still having a hard time getting my head wrapped around it. It's one of those concepts that I see it, I theoretically get it, but then when I go to implement it, my object-oriented brain jumps in and mashes it in the wrong way.
Sure.
I do think that's going to be a very powerful technique that had its origins in the functional space.
Yeah. But for me, I do a lot of back-end development, right? So, well, when I get to write code, I don't get to write as much code as I want to sometimes, but
sure.
But that's my focus is the back-end. So hence, so it's a lot of just passing data back and forth, right? And so hence the records really are starting to make more sense to me. Now, as we were talking earlier, I mean, it's well, no, I haven't mentioned. So our company's not going to go to we're not going to go to .NET 5. I kind of look. I don't know if you have to go to .NET 5 to get C# 9 or not. I actually don't know.
I don't remember.
I need to look that up. But if that is a requirement, then we're going to have to wait till .NET 6. Because we made a decision actually last year that we're forcing no current releases. We're going to stick with LTS releases. Yep. And it's just a supportability issue. All right.
Absolutely.
I have the company agreed upon that I get to do 1 month a year. I get to do a tech debt release.
Nice.
And so I have that, but I have that once a year, right? So if we went to a current release and like every, look, .NET 5, I expect .NET 5 to come out. And I expect .NET 5.1 to come out in like January, right? Yep. Because there's going to be things wrong with it. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, and let it be known, Microsoft hasn't said anything, even the MVPs, they haven't said anything, right? So there's nothing, I know nothing about that. I've just been around a long time.
Exactly. Exactly.
Which would then mean we'd have to upgrade again and so forth. But that's why we've timed it. And actually, it's interesting. We're right now in 2.1. We're going to upgrade to 3.1 this fall. We're not doing an upgrade next year because that was the other question. Because last year we went from 1.1 to 2.1.
Right. And
so of course I got the question. Well, we're going to do this every year. I'm like, no, because next year we're not going to do an upgrade, a .NET upgrade, because because 6 won't be out yet.
Right.
So
right. That's a good path. I mean, having that agreement is huge. A lot of organizations struggle with that cadence.
It helps that my VP, the VP of technology, he was a developer for a long time. Right. Well, it's interesting. He and I see, we're pretty close in our paths of how we see things. So it works really well.
That's really good.
And what's really worked is he, this is not official, but unofficially, he basically takes care of all the business side of tech, and I take care of all the technical side of tech.
That's a nice split.
And it's worked really well. And again, that's subconsciously that's how it's happened. Sure. But by doing that, again, it allows us to both focus on what we're really strong on. Right?
Absolutely.
I mean, both of us could do the other side very easily, and we've proven it well before. But by doing what is our strong suit, we've made, I think, a really good tech leadership.
That's fantastic.
along with I was mentioning you before. I have a tech leadership meeting this afternoon.
Right.
We have a couple, because then we have a couple other folks, who are like QA lead,
Oh, sure. Operations, that type of stuff.
who are running that side of that, their stuff too. But, no, I really, again, that wasn't how when we talked about this job. That's not what was decided. I mean, literally, he wanted to break off some of his work, and he wanted someone who was more technically focused, right? Who could still write code.
Yep.
He could write code if he really wanted to. He just doesn't want to.
Got it.
And but I want to, hence I do a live daily, I do a daily live stream code, right? Because I want to keep on writing code, right? It's and let it be known, my father still writes code, and he's 74 years old, right? So it's
nice.
It's guess how I got started, right?
Yep. Similar background, actually.
Oh yeah, cool.
Oh yeah, I can remember my dad trying to write a program to solve the Rubik's Cube when it came out. So.
Well, I was gonna say I didn't ask, so I mean, obviously, so you had your dad was interested. I mean, how did you get your start in technology?
It's kind of a roundabout way, actually. As a kid growing up, it was the dawn of the personal computer age. So we had our Tandy TRS-80 computer. I wanted video games. You had to type them out of a book or a magazine. So I did that. So that's kind of how I learned the concepts of it. I was really into hard sciences. So I went to school to become a research physicist. But I had the opportunity in high school to work in a research astronomy lab for a summer, and I learned Fortran. I had to do some programming to do the data analysis. So when I went to college, I decided I need to learn how to do that well, so I'm not just hacking at it. So I did physics and computer science. Partway through my schooling, I realized that there weren't a whole lot of jobs out there for physicists, and the math is really, really, really hard. So I kind of flipped over to go in the computer science path. And everything I've learned from the hard sciences has helped me tremendously. Debugging, problem solving, troubleshooting, all comes from my science background. Ask a question, get an answer. Ask a question, get an answer, sort of thing. So that's how I've gotten into kind of programming directly. And then from there, it's just continued on.
Mm-hmm. Oh, cool. That was really cool.
Yep.
So, how has the pandemic been treating you?
In some ways, great, right? Being a natural introvert, not being forced to go out and socialize has not been terrible. It was a little hard at first with like my family and my wife's family. Parents are getting a little older, just being able to see them and keep up with them. So once things eased, we've been able to visit with them and kind of keep up with them a lot better. I think the hardest has been dealing with the kids. They need to get out. They need those social outlets, and having the entire family cooped up in the house is sometimes explosive, but otherwise we've made do. So
yes, nothing like having your 23-year-old back home and mom and your 23-year-old getting at ends with each other.
Exactly. Yeah, mine are 17, 15, and 8, so it's a little bit different of a mix. But the 8-year-old and the 17 and 15-year-old, they just have different interests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the hard part for my 20, I mean, so she's in grad school. She obviously came home early from that because of the pandemic. So she's not completely independent, right? Because I mean, number one, everything's still paid by me, right? But she's more independent, right? She has an apartment. She shares with somebody and all, So being back home and mom watching over and mom telling her, hey, you need to do this. Hey, you need to do that. Why haven't you done this? Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah. Yep.
Let's just say it's funny. When we dropped my daughter off, so she went to Dayton University, which is about 2 hours away from our house. And I remember the drive home. That was a really rough drive home because my wife just got so emotional. Sure. And I was getting what have you done to me? You've taken my daughter away from me. And I'm sort of like, she's 2 hours away, right? It's not that far, right? And my daughter's leaving in 2 weeks, and I think my wife can't wait.
We're starting the college search, and I think we're all kind of at that point in life. He's got to go. Yeah. We need some space. Yeah.
So it was definitely not like previous years, right? Where it's she's going to leave us again, and now it's like, oh my goodness, I can't wait till she gets out of my house.
Yep. I think I understand that sentiment now more than I did.
Yeah. of course, like I say, still everything's being paid by me, so I don't know how much that allows really is.
Right.
So it's Doug was making another comment that he was cleaning up his house and he ran in a whole bunch of copies of a home computer magazine with code listings in the back.
Yep.
Definitely does keep those around. Those,
yes.
And sure enough, next time I see, I'd love to see some of those.
It would be fun to recreate some of those.
Oh, I remember the days of having to, getting the magazines and typing in all the code, and then the fun of trying to debug them because you missed something somewhere in that code.
Right.
That. I mean, you want to. Why do we not? How do we learn? We learn by typing all this code by hand, right?
That's exactly right.
We couldn't read code examples online and just copy and paste, right?
There was no online at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
And very few people to ask for help. If you didn't know somebody on your street that had any inkling of what to do,
and as Douglas mentioned, and saving them to tape cassette. Yes, exactly.
Oh yeah, that's how I learned how to save and back stuff up. Yep.
Yeah. So for all the younger generation, I mean, the save icon, which is us know that as a disc, right? Well, before we had discs, we had cassettes.
Yes, we did.
That was always fun.
Yes, it was. Make sure you got it in the right way. Make sure it's the right cassette.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Line up to the right place of the cassette, and oh yeah, it was I keep on looking. Oh, okay. Now, Sean saying and Chad use stones. Okay, I'm not that old.
I don't know. I had to do a machine language course in college. That felt a lot like moving the stones around. So
I was going to say, I mean, now grant you, I do remember punch cards. I never worked with punch cards, but my father did, right? So I remember well, right? And I remember helping him with it. Cutting notches in double-sided discs so to make them double-sided and such. Yes.
So you can readable or writable or not writable. Yep, yes. Absolutely.
Well, that was the whole crazy part, the disc. Because remember, you got the disc, and to make them double-sided, all you need to do is punch a notch in, and that made it double-sided, right? Or you had to pay like twice the price for the disc. I mean, it's it was
exactly.
Yeah, but so sure. I mean, if I understand, so your wife's a teacher.
She is. So she's a preschool teacher.
Preschool.
Yes.
So, I mean, what have they been doing?
That has been a challenge. I think with the start of the pandemic, that was a little bit easier because she had a good 6 months to build a rapport with the kids. And then she was putting stuff online. She'd try to get them on videos, at least provide a video of her from a daily basis. But preschool's a tough age, especially with the parents working from home. Yeah. Older siblings working from home. The start of this next school year is a little bit up in the air. So it's been kind of a daily, what's it going to be now? Sure. So just trying to prepare for everything, trying to figure out what she's going to have or not have and go from there.
I'm sure so far in St. Louis, are you starting school normally or going to go online or? It's
a mix. So a lot of the public school districts are starting online only. The private schools are a mixed bag across the board. So my kids are all in private school. My high schoolers are starting in a mixed mode. So they'll do 2 half days a week in person, and then the rest is virtual. The grade schooler is the family's got to pick either all virtual or all in person. We chose all in person. The virtual learning was tough on a lot of us. And he needs the outlet. So we'll see where that goes, and then based on how the pandemic goes, everything will adjust.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, there's really no good answer, right? I mean, it's literally, damned if you do, damned if you don't. At some point.
Yep.
For it.
Absolutely.
Especially when it comes to the schools, right? I mean, that's just it's one thing to work from home, but it's another thing to try to learn from school or from home, right?
Well, especially for certain age groups, right? The high school and older, they seem to be able to deal well with it. They're a little more independent. Grade school, maybe, but once you start getting into those lower age groups, the preschool, kindergarten first, it's a lot of hands-on. You need a lot of one-on-one attention to make that work, and that's just really hard when you've got parents working and trying to deal with that stuff as well.
I'll talk about. I mean, there's some subjects that just don't really work as well.
Yes.
Right? I mean, like talk about high school. I mean, like how are you supposed to do chemistry from home, right? It's
Right.
or even biology, right? I mean, once you get you can't well, I guess you could dissect from home, but
it's a little harder when you have to catch it yourself, but you could probably do it.
Right. It's and sure, I saw that. So my daughter, so she's studying vocal performance, right? She's learning.
Okay.
She's studying to be an opera singer, right?
Sure.
And you would talk about interesting stuff, right? It's trying to go virtually. I mean, how do you because number one, you can't do duets and all that stuff because it doesn't work,
Right?
Because you're going to be off no matter what you do.
Yes.
You're going to be off. There's nothing you because trust me, I looked into it because we tried to make but even that, I mean, just doing voice lessons because this even the best connection you can get, it's still not the audio quality that a voice teacher needs, right? To be able to hear you and say, oh, your octave right here needs this type of tuning to it.
Right.
It was interesting. They did a decent job with it.
That's good.
But she's getting ready to start her second year for her master's program, and they have said, yeah, no matter what, we're being personal. We're going to figure this out.
Yep.
Yeah, Doug was saying
it's hard. It's hard to do that with a mask. You can't really sing with a mask on, and the social distancing then is different too.
So they're going to be doing a lot more testing. COVID testing.
Sure.
Actually, it's interesting. So they passed on their. They gave them an email the other day with some of the rules, along with the. So it's in Boston. So the rules for Massachusetts.
Okay.
Which is interesting. So according to Massachusetts, any state that's not in New England is high risk. Because basically the rules are if you come out of state from a high risk state, you have to quarantine for 2 weeks.
Right.
And then all right, no problem. And of course, I mean now, actually Kentucky now is starting. The numbers are starting to go up, but as of last week, our numbers they were going up like everyone else, but nowhere, not the spikes that everyone else was seeing. And I'm like, all right, well, we should be fine because we're not Florida, Texas, California, these states. But then you scroll down and you see the map. And it's like everything outside of New England, right? Or Hawaii. Hawaii was okay.
Until you actually have to land to get here, and then you've already contaminated yourself. So,
that's a good point. I wonder, if that means touching down in the state. If that, flying from Hawaii, you're not flying directly from Hawaii to
no.
I mean, you could, but no airline,
Right.
Trust me, you can because that's just like flying over to Asia.
Oh yeah, but I don't know of any airlines that do that kind of a direct. Yeah.
I mean, maybe Aloha Airlines. I don't know what they do, but
do they get out to Boston?
I doubt it.
Yeah,
but I don't actually know.
Right. So all of a sudden you've contaminated yourself landing in an airport.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's I don't know. Which is why that's why school for her doesn't start till after Labor Day, but she's like I say next week. Yeah, I think it's next week. No, it's the week after. It's same week as Code PaLOusa. She's leaving on Monday. That was the other.
Sure.
She wanted to leave a little bit later in the week. I'm like, no, I got Code PaLOusa going on. You're leaving Monday, so you're out of the house, and I know you're settled. Yeah. But that way she gets her, because the school is also requiring 2 week, minimum 2 weeks.
Oh, sure.
It's the state law, anyways. And then,
you can see with baseball, right? Baseball's having a hard time. The St. Louis Cardinals now are quarantined, and you can see how that works, right? You get a group together if they're not. Yeah,
even there where they were quarantined, and they're still.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's. I don't. Like I say, I don't know if there's a good answer to anything other than just. I don't know. I mean. Again, and I don't take this politically, but I think we just opened up too soon, right?
I completely agree.
Now, with it being said, I won't get into politics, but everyone says, "Oh, well, if so-and-so was the president, it would have been different." I'm like, I don't know how much more different it would have been, right?
No.
I think people are forgetting how Americans are, right? And number one, we're so spread out, right? It doesn't work as well like in Europe, where you close down, but you're only 5 minutes away from the store, so the deliveries are easier to do, right?
Yes.
I'm not 5 minutes away from anything, and I'm living in the city, right?
Yep.
I mean, I'm in
Well,
the suburb area, but
we've also got urban areas and rural areas, and the rural areas are completely different because they don't see anybody anyway. So to shut things down seems silly, but they haven't been able to navigate that difference. They don't want to say, you're in a city, you got to stay shut down. You're in the country, it's okay. We don't have a whole lot of authentic leadership, I think, trying to help guide us through this.
well, that's part of the problem Kentucky's going through, right? Kentucky, you look at it, and it's three and a half big cities because Bowling Green's getting bigger and bigger, but basically three big areas, and then you got the rest of the state, right? Which land-wise is most of the state. Population-wise is very little, right? And so you got but how the state is run, it's run by the rural area. It's really weird, right?
Missouri's the same way.
It's run by the rural areas, right? I was gonna say because St. Louis is not your capital. It's
no, it's Jeff City.
I was gonna say
St. Louis and Kansas City are the predominant urban areas.
Yes.
Yep.
It probably is very much the same thing because Frankfurt is our capital, which is it's like 80,000 people, right? I mean, which in comparison is tiny, right? Because there's the city of Louisville itself has 800,000, right?
Exactly.
The region has about 1.5 million, right?
Sounds a lot like St. Louis.
Well over a third of the population of the state. But so the state's kind of like, oh well, we don't need all these all these social distancing stuff, and we can have crowds of 100 people. Why is that a problem? And I'm like, it is a problem.
Yep. Well, we had the same thing with the Lake of the Ozarks, right? Over Memorial Day, most of those bars opened up because that's their livelihood. It made national news. Then all these people went back to Kansas City and St. Louis, and you see the numbers just slowly elevate. So, yep.
Yeah, it's interesting because Kentucky's actually been pretty progressive on everything. To include, we reclosed the bars earlier than most other states did.
Oh, nice. Very good.
Well, good and bad. Again, I feel for the bar owners, right?
Absolutely.
I have a good friend who runs a brewery, and they're just hit hard this year.
Yes.
2 times doing that. They did have someone who came down with it over the year, which they did the right. They closed it up, cleaned everything out. So obviously, it's been hard for them, right? And
Sure.
I do feel for that, right? And it's, it's. I don't know. I can't wait till we have a vaccination. That's all I can say.
Agreed. Yep. Agreed.
So, well, moving on. What do you like to do for fun? I would say board games because I see that.
Yeah. Mostly that's with the kids. Like I said, I'm still in my temporary pandemic zone. Recently, I've gotten into software-defined radio.
Okay.
So I've been playing with the little radio dongle doing reception. I've got it hooked up to a Raspberry Pi so I can listen in on a bunch of different bands. A few weeks ago, I actually got my amateur radio license so I can do a little bit more with that.
Oh, cool.
Trying to play around with that. The pandemic has been interesting because I haven't, before that, had a lot of free time. It's usually been scout meetings and baseball, soccer, practices all over the place that my time is about 9 to 9:30, and then I'm usually falling asleep on the couch in that time period. So it's been the pandemic has offered some opportunities to do a little more programming, a little more learning, a little more exploration. So that's been one of the good things of it.
Cool. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Any topic?
Sure.
I've always got thoughts on any topic.
Yeah.
No, I'm looking forward to Code PaLOusa. I'm looking forward to being able to talk about some functional techniques in C#. The Spot the Bug talk is really meant to be a little more interactive, fun way to talk about some design concepts that, over the years have been designed out in languages, but are still good concepts to know and be aware of. So hopefully that one works out well virtually. I'm just looking forward to the experience.
Awesome. No, I really appreciate you joining me today, but more importantly, I appreciate that you've been joining us at Code PaLOusa.
Thank you for having me.
Really looking forward to it. I wish you could be in person again.
Absolutely.
But we've got a point. We were going to have a central location to run everything, and we canceled that. We're going to be doing it from our homes because it's just, as we were just saying, the right thing to do.
Exactly, and it's just easier, no hassles.
Well, talk about the mask. I was talking to the Hyatt, and I'm like, look, I just don't see how we're I would require everyone to wear a mask, but that's not going to work well as I'm trying to talk, help a speaker out. I'm talking through a mask, right? That's just not going to work right.
Right.
So awesome. Well, again, I do appreciate it, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
And everyone else, thank you for joining us today.